Hello, humanity. My name is Anthony Wall. This is YouTube. This video is hosted through youtube.com/user/RomulusWall. Yeah, free for all vaccines. But see, our free speech is prevented offensively in sustained ways, originally and still, each individual's, and they're pretending other, simultaneously, through a breaching method that is syntax oriented. It is syntax dominated and is self-cultivated, self-valued. How dominated? Because how it is a syntax is how it hurts every modern nation, sickly distinctly, effectively having left maintained self-valued, how sickly non-discerned distinctly. We are victims. Self-valued because even they don't understand it. This was sophistication since before any modern nation's leaders were born. It's a method that has all locations, areas, states, sciences, database relationships, further overt criminal enterprises, all the policing of that, know as syntax nature, as fact-cheaping nature, as criminal insidiousness nature. If one says, what is slavery about? What is more fact-cheaping nature, true always that it was, besides bad? Psycho is even more defensible than saying, it was about prejudice. It's about a breaching method. And this is relevant to how it is unceasing breaching method. It is maintained on a self-valued breaching method because of where it is and how it is syntax oriented. Where and how all were victims to it. It had all locations, areas, and states victims to it. Victim reactions, victim affect nature. Nature is identity. Nature's identity's simultaneous relationship to negative, positive. I didn't read this. I'm using evidence of how mandated law is prevented. Free speech is prevented, or they steal our voices. And they self-value vertical and horizontal databases, facilitated predicate acts that everyone missed but will discern, and uses of them per the lipoaggression, sequence shifts, wrongdoing with each age of fact-cheaping nature, sickly victim, to keep how sickly non-distinctly from being discerned. Each group difference, each age, area, sex, location. They have the syntax of what physical culture is, maintained to keep each of the sciences individually and grouped and together. Identity, ground, locations, victims. Everyone speaking through other, self-value. Uses of the identity of the law, the way they're preventing how they are positive and negative simultaneously and in relationship to what is relative, and the identity of relativity that is actual, and its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that perfect value progression that is discernible per science. But this is per a quality of fact-cheaping nature that we have been prevented, because criminal insidiousness natures of sequence treatments, of premises treatments, of active value treatments, progressive, and identity treatments. We have them only formally, informally, and interbranch. Hundreds of nations at once. So where they dispute with it, they fight with each other to maintain distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. But with that further, but to maintain lipoaggressions, cover up readings of statutes that are criminally foreign influenced, that are delusions raw. If you say that, it is more defensible and is true always, not denying exceptions, not valuing them denied. unity to force logic that says it has to. We have to claim it about prejudice. Leaves out that quality of fact sheet with nature per this method that had all victim roles with that. Then forced further victims, predators will discern we're the perfect world. Subtle ways. This is where everyone's a good people, but they're forced to fact treatment natures, and treatments are positive or negative already. Other people's names. In relationship to all that is actually tied to our communications and what is actually being communicated. So we'll learn about different natures of confessions, including as statements, because these are also confessions of sequence relationships, natures of sequence shifting, that is all throughout the human fact treatment nature, because we're in a sequence trap, a syntax trap. They have theory, interesting, including music theory. The music science must come before music theory. The notes have an individual, they have a grouped, and they have a connected identity of relationship / S to themselves. Distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, the same way the sounds of the syntax of the languages of the species identity of volume / S is. That is where we and how we are semi-nature. Relationship to what is one identity that is at least equivalent to and a little bit more than the body, the identity of the body of forever. Each identity has, physical body's identity has identity greater than itself and less than itself differentially and simultaneously. Because one simultaneous nature is in relationship to us. If one says slavery is about roles with a quality of fact treatment nature that is criminally foreign, that was criminally foreign influenced, in the furtherance of a predicate acts delivery system method that we must refer to as an archetypal criminal enterprise, and that which is most responsible and most for the furtherance of overt criminal enterprises. All exceptions in exception nature are also in demonstration of that. Also, per how this is also a vertical and horizontal database organized crime method, distinctly and non-distinctly private, and on and off campuses simultaneously, though. And on and off sciences of each age and nature, including homeschooled, where consciousness of that is maintained to maintain self-valued roles with all locations, with all fact treatment nature, positive and negative treatment, identity treatments as fact treatment nature. Note sequence treatments in relationship to all that is actually tied to the vertical and horizontal predicate acts delivery system method with the databases. But what came worse is what kept that and keeps that outcome from off campuses. Now we have people that are offensively pretending in life to all locations, areas, and states for all kinds of different motivations juxtaposed. Passions and emotions of thinking, calling other people's names good or bad. Because in collusion originally still we have criminal insidious natures of positive treatments and of negative treatments simultaneously as identity treatments, but as an identity of negative value nature progression. Slavery is about the identity of negative value nature progression that was forced all roles self-valued. Self-value per your nature forces you to keep being its system. So you have to pretend. So you had to, in other words, they're giving people individually grouped in together, how to be fact cheap in nature responses to each other, to themselves, each individual, to yourself, me to myself. We are this system. Where and how /S the perfect world's forsaken 100 nations, A1 through how many nations there are, Z however many there are. That's shared here and there. They told us enough about it that they can't speak. They're not supposed to give away their stuff about it, but they do that anyway. For example, where we are, syntax trap. All this time we had obligations by our founders, wanted us to explain how they had words forced, theater forced. They wanted us to explain and understand quickly. Doesn't take long to. There's no excuse. Criminal and seditious nature pretend that. See, we're going to observe juxtaposed motivations simultaneously for people to hurt strangers that in ways they don't want to do. Per all that is to intercities, campuses of each age and nature, recorded and involved with a vertical and horizontal database organized crime method. Simultaneously, to counter that though, you also have to observe what is also simultaneously recorded, which is their uses of all identity of the ground locations and people in relationship to this. Intercities. It is evidence that and how it is worse than just criminal incompetence of all leaders, black and white. The second they have that predicate act sick method then, relevant now, to ongoing with fact-cheating nature slavery. So that can be simultaneously defended, and not admitted, and our founders told about truly. You have to lie about them. This is one of the reasons it is plausible that is code for us, even if it was made up by someone. They told us that George Washington said he cannot tell a lie, but he said he did tell a lie. He did chop down the cherry tree. But he said, in other words, he came to Connecticut. Right before that's where he met with the French general here in Wethersfield, Connecticut. They are further recorded, confessed, and demonstrated now involved with predicate acts with the child campuses. All that's going on with the coronavirus and stuff like this. These same people are involved with this. All kinds of natures of organized crime with the kids. Also interbranch, not legitimate too, because they've been hiding it and hiding live aggressions. And acting, because their roles with attaching little kids and their family members to fake words and natures of ties to other people and ties to other people. Fake words with each other in a sustained way. They've been fabricating audio and video in cases, interbranch. This is relevant to how they have and already had peaceful means to settle things, even when they're being unsettled, like war. The whole time there are people trying to figure out how they're going to react to the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures that originally and still since semi-ancient times they can't defend their roles with what is called, as victims, as the syntax trap already. Uses of that perception maintained originally and still criminally foreign influenced. What is native pure, all modern nations fell to this. Native Americans fell last. That's what made Americas. We're falling fast too. And we can't do this unless we use the species together, per its system. We could draw and understand means like that. Even benefits of while it's being built. An identity of grounds, identity of relationship / S to itself, that reveals means out of nowhere. Evolution's fruits and gifts. The means to afford it. Any other value nature systems, not any individual group that together is going to be able to afford other. That's going to maintain self-value, what has been, which are states, areas, locations, all victim predators. This is about all victim predators. If you say slavery is about all victim predators, then, and it's still now, that's demonstrably true always. Not denying any exceptions, not valuing them denied. People who want to debate other, they're going to be manifest, forced by nature's identity of relationship to itself actually existing. As self-valued, criminally foreign influence, fact-cheating nature, criminal and seditious nature. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a police form, I'm a criminal. Lawyers, the bar itself is recorded, confessed, demonstrated. They want to restrict conversations to backgrounds not legitimately. You can't get, in other words, these lawyers are making up allegations with physical delusions while fabricating evidence isn't just pretending it's not normal talk, rhetoric, whatever. They have all words / values used criminally. We're in the syntax trap. They are preventing mandated law and having prevented it, needing to pretend other. That's how they are used remotely. As victims, but as victim predators. Each branch of government individually grouped in together. So they have roles with the protests as reported by CNN, by Fox Connecticut News, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. And we have roles with the coronavirus, as reported by them, and as reported by local news like WFSB, that also has roles with the advertisements on news agencies, and that are recorded, confessed, and demonstrated. Also, as sensibilities note, coached to pretend passions and emotions. Pretended, because there is theater with all locations. But no one, in other words, we never had a legitimate location. And this knew we would have to speak about such things, for example, with our syntax. So they had offensively legitimacy involved with a sustained organized crime method that is from off campuses of each age sickly and on off them already having been self-valued, already having been taken to self-valued fact-cheating in nature, manifest, actual roles with bad things that happened and will. That could have been prevented then and now. Simultaneously, not only could they have been prevented, if it would have revealed a quality of finite, active, progressive, simultaneously treatments, true always, and care behind that and identity sequence nature / simultaneous nature before and beyond that, to further scientifically relevant. Because one identity or volume is that as 5 7 natures and is that as 3 natures simultaneously, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. Those 3 ways, both ways, is its identity. So it is invisible but still discernible. It is the identity inventions work or not in relationship to. It is the invention that they are further positive or not in relationship to. People say, pick a side. The Quran or the Bible. These are multi-front counters and roles with the scientific preservation of evidences relevant, but before we can get to that, you guys have to follow sequence. You have to follow mandated law. Because the people involved, since before the World Trade Center attack, they were involved with the locations where they have the investigations and vetting identities, where everyone speaks through other, so they could set things up in courts and in depositions where they're also fabricating fake things into databases, fake audio and video because no one's looking. Then they pretend things like justice must come through the courts so they can pretend not to realize their roles with the branches of government distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously being and having been used remotely, every single one of them. Distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously each branch. All victim predators. This is relevant when people make opinions about slavery or color. It's only to make. See, if it was to fight about, like verbally, is to verbally argue about. See, these are fake sides of correlation nature. But it was really to argue about what is simultaneously positive as sequence true before the finite. Distinctly, non-distinctly, while as the value of the finite. Distinctly and non-distinctly and simultaneously, while as the value of what is active. Distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, while as the value of what is progressive. And as identity, semi-nature relationship to this, which engineered how and why we are individual group ages, areas, sexes, grouped. That's one thing it is true all those ways together. And species, bonded and parted simultaneously. The earth is flat and round. I'll gather round boxings. Boxings in the martial arts were revealed by ancients that were of and as a nature of sophistication before sciences became criminally foreign influenced. Victims to what they had to counter, simultaneously having to defend those fact-cheaping nature counters, simultaneously separating themselves from the actual answer /S as led by the identity of value /value progression perfect. Time reason, stuff like that. No one saw this coming. No one could fathom that anyone would trick the entire species identity of volume into forgetting how to reveal evolution's fruits and gifts. It means out of nowhere, including fact-cheaping nature, not just agreement. We have an identity of negative value nature progression, self-value by the victims of it, regardless of if they have success or not. This is timeless success. This gets everyone happier. It makes their success even better. They all get hot. All we have to do, we have recorded. See, well, what is the progressive value of what was engineered to be our space relationships? I know there are tons of, I don't want to call them excuses, reasons. I don't want to call that reason without this influence of the breaching method, the predicate acts delivery system method, which was database oriented since before computers were known. The transatlantic cable, reportedly around 1829, was, imagine that, 1829, the Civil War was around 1860, 1865. Everyone left out and leaves out know how slavery was entrenched in the North and the South sickly distinctly. Excuse me. Everyone left / leaves out how slavery was still entrenched in the North. Again, sickly distinctly. Then and now, per the recorded identity theft / frauds relevant to demonstration of that. But the quality of fact-cheating nature needed to demonstrate that immediately is prevented free speech. It has also prevented the evidences of it, which is the recorded, for example, the recorded extortion of, in fact-cheating nature, slavery of our founding parents, and the recorded fact-cheating nature employed, opinion natures / conviction natures dishonestly breaching screen and weapons and tools employed, pretending they don't understand that and how our founding parents were fact. Of course, not as bad as some people, namely black people, because they put that in there. See, but admitting this, we know who our species, who we have to help as our species identity of value. And as the identity of the ground, relationships. To and as with this new that no one could afford individually grouped it together. So it would have to adapt. As fact-cheating nature, syntax nature. As identities of, not just identities of jobs and titles. Identities of people, A through Z. Identity of the ground, locations, A through Z, regardless if it's family or not. This is uses of investigations, investigators, and vetting identities already remotely since before our founding parents were even born, incapable of free speech, so they had to leave us to fight for it. That other were pretending, not just pretending other too strong. They had this foundation that is syntax oriented and no one saw it coming. I mean, no one realized, no one had the words for it. Without blaming correctly all that juxtaposed with it, but leaving out. So there are only three branches of government: the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the political branch. It's not just legislative. What is about slavery? If you say slavery is about, what is modern slavery is about? Same thing, outside of courts, outside of interbranch locations, outside of communications with them, where they know they use the recorded, confessed, and demonstrated individually grouped and together. They use the right to lie, to hide their lie progressions, and the lie progressions of all the people tied to them and all the identity, the ground locations tied to them. This is the trap that every modern nation is in. All locations, areas, and states are criminally foreign influenced. They lost this how to think. Without criminal foreign influences, they have to pretend other know. They have been fabricating audio and video. If you said slavery and its identity of relativity to the relationship /s to the recorded, effectively maintained self-valued, bonded natures of organized crime methods and natures of it imposed upon each person of majority black communities or entirely black communities. That's not saying prejudice. Now we're getting to the problem. See, now people involved with the problem needing to pretend other are involved with already all identity of the ground locations had to do that originally and still. As syntax. Right, people want to have opinions. Follow mandated law. So there were a whole bunch of people with the name Sullivan. Another one just called me about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. And I tried to call back. They keep delaying time because these are people intercities where they're using time that are involved with the recorded off campuses roles with predicate acts, relevant to one's on-off campuses, and interbranch locations, fabricating audio and video, forging names, switching names, officers, uses of the right to lie, where they were or are simultaneously recorded, preventing and having prevented to be told on, their exploitation of all exceptions and exception nature associated with that. They are also recorded with the leaderships of the prisons tied to them, also with the families involved with through time the relevant campuses, further involved this entire school year and other in sustained ways. Now, so they have wire crime methods that are tied to interbranch forging of names, switching names, stacking fabricated audio and video, spreading verbal lies, sequence shifts, illusions, on-off their locations, on-off campuses further, on-off private database further roles, on-off all locations tied to that. This is exploiting how we are our value/value progression as the identity of volume /S and its identity of relationship to it itself as itself. So before we completely understand computers, we can understand them the way experts of each science are obfuscating what volume/S is relevant to all questions as the identity as all answer/S. Anything that could be made up has two identities of complete possession on both sides of it while being itself. And exception nature are in demonstration of that. One identity is coming to, from, while as, while with, and while for each other identity as its own, and as its own positive or negative relationship to itself. So its identity of value progression perfect is relevant. So we have mandated law as a phrase, as all phrases, because they've been using all words through criminal foreign influence and with delusions juxtaposed, and as their roles with rules crimes, including with the sequence shifts, including with their roles with uses of that per the fact sheet nature oriented predicate acts that are on campuses. It is relevant to worse things on campuses manifest that are also on off campuses. And so, for example, in the syntax trap, they already had people that studied such and such employed for motivations that were in this method that has juxtaposed motivations for evil, motivations for roles with criminal and seditious nature, positive simultaneously to all identity ground locations, while is from all locations already maintained on and off those locations. Naive syntax collusion. So we have naive A-B logic. So everyone wants to get along with their neighbors, for example. But we have the investigators' investigations and vetting identities, forcing the sense and sensibilities, and forcing the syntax nature of people around us to collusion with them. And they're preventing mandated law so we can't make peace with everyone and keep peace. Nor counter, which is their roles with simultaneously forcing peace to be sick, psychotic, fake. CT must break. So if you said slavery and its relevancy with that breaching method to the fact sheet with nature impositions upon, time impositions upon, identity impositions upon the people of the species, identity of the grounds. You know, our relationships to this worse than you guys because that breaching method had this employed. Who's going to deny that? That's different than say who's going to deny prejudice. What needs to hide that needs us to say, you know, but keep that only heard. Each place where we have to make fact treatments of positive and negative is leaving out this system that is three bonded identities of positive that will only stay positive onto themselves, using negative to make more positive if it has to use negative. It wants to be, and that's what, in other words, Leith of Hadith is force, space, nature, transfer. What is nature? It is the identity of value progression that science reveals. Its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that only increasing is what is positive or negative. That reveals evolution's fruits and gifts, or their loss. Leith of Hadith. A 10. Betrayal tribe all seas. The branch of government need a way out. This is what our founders want us to understand. I'll clap you chant. Vaccines. So this is an identity of the grounds, identity of value / value progression. And so I'd have to, with the ancient gaming system, we're going to draw this reality. We're going to, we all benefit and take away so many impositions. By the way, disclaimer, I mean, knowing we're going to change the natures of industries, that will hurt people. See, but if we agree we're going to do this as a species identity of volume, we can anticipate that and put what everyone already agrees. We're not going lower. And we're going to be able to afford what is the law is read sick and has been read sick. Statutes and precedents are recorded, criminally foreign influenced and delusions raw. That overall statements like that they want and need to debate by leaving out our needs to cite our short words what is actually recorded in and outside of courts. But they have the method of bringing people into courts where they have been fabricating audio and video, and the people that run the prisons tied to them. I'm not a criminal, I'm not a police form, not a judge. The science is every single one of them. The human syntax nature is sick. Alpha and omega. This is about syntax. LMN, OP. MNO, they are bonded. Mother. M stands for mother. N stands for neutrality or neutral. Neutrals. And N stands for, O stands for omega. So mother is a female, omega. See, the identity of forever needs alpha, omega, and what is a semi-nature that is coupled by what is positive or negative to itself. And the value of what is positive or negative to itself reveals evolution's fruits, gifts here. Or it forces Earth's distinct, non-distinct, positive, also positive relationship to itself from here. As value, as nature, / nature as value. Leith of Hadith, force from away from itself, from the part of itself, where it can make more and more forever, identity of forever nature that is also positive unto itself. Because we were no longer positive. Heaven and hell were revealed as tools of science. God was revealed as a tool of science. And referring to when we have argument and debate, it's a big difference when you leave out subjects. You leave out exceptions in exception nature. You prevent that perpetually, increasingly. Note, then defending that. See, that can't. So we have a knave, opinion/conviction natures, everyone, A through Z. When that's all that I've ever heard, and all that anyone has ever heard. Speaking for the law, speaking for logic. See, we have various natures of courts that are involved with locations crimes with a whole bunch of other nations. For example, in layers of other natures of evil. So they self-value. Syntactically, if and when people blame that for that evil correctly, they also get it wrong. And that's exploited. We also have the bar itself. And we have the lawyers themselves, recorded how maintained, used in collusion with the news agencies, their family members, of everything, leading up to the World Trade Center attack, with Connecticut's interbranch, intercampuses roles, as the same ones now involved then and further with the principal child of Founders Campus, proven, but further recorded, confessed, and as per reported. The same news people have been making things up, and with other people on the child offender registry and enrolls with them. They also recorded, confessed, and demonstrated a whole bunch of foreign and domestic collusion with interbranch and foreign with locations like on-off libraries and on-off Wethersfield Library with people on-off Church Street in Old Wethersfield. Now this is everyone forced to speak through others, and while they're attaching me to fake words, others to fake words, fake locations, fake ties to other people, fake natures of ties to other people. If they don't, it'll show. If they don't steal people's identities, and worse, then it'll show what is actually recorded, which is how they were fabricating audio and video in cases. There were our roles with juxtaposed natures of organized crime against everyone and against areas sickly, distinctly, effectively to keep, and against each age of fact-shaping nature, sickly, distinctly, effectively to keep, and having kept how sickly, non-distinctly from being discerned. Not one has learned. So we're going to need a quality of fact-shaping nature now. The same people are involved on off the World Trade Center locations in Manhattan, right before the attack, and leading up to that, years like they were also involved with Washington D.C. a whole bunch of ways, as the people from Church Street in Old Wethersfield. Then you're right around the corner. That's where George Washington had to meet with the French general. Right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War, he had to secure his help for their attempt to leave off the surface value of the Constitution and a semi-defense of the republic for which we stand, and which is the value of the Constitution's surface value valued simultaneously. But see, they were incapable of doing that, because of breaching method already had the syntax nature of humanity assembled and programmed, criminally foreign influence, for example, and pretending other as syntax nature, blaming the real causes of it and or valuing the real cause of it, blamed on other things others themselves, and then defending that. No, as positive and negative treatments, as identity treatment simultaneously. No, as syntax nature, style that could no longer defend itself in us from this sophistication of a predicate acts delivery system method, of breaching method, where it maintained sophistication, valued fake or not. Not at all. So free speech is offensively prevented by the police, how they're victims. But they're also victim predators, for example, pretending that they don't understand. You could be either before the police or against the police. They recorded, confessed, and demonstrated, use that method to pretend they don't realize that their roles with fabrication of audio and video in cases, and with all that tied to the courts, to hide their live aggressions tied to that, and their roles with all locations. Now they have to hide from and hurt and value fake altogether, and steal the identities of, attach people to fake locations, fake sequence relationships. Anyone who's going to use logic, not criminally foreign influenced, not delusions raw. All private tied to the interbranch are also involved with the crime methods, with the sequence crimes, and with the locations crimes. They're forcing problems between people. These are people involved with body dumping spots, real or made up, even if it's tied just to where they have on or off campuses of each age and nature. Then they pretend it's personal between us and the campus. This is a crime method also recorded as evidence. See, but they have criminal ideas on what's evidence, which is recorded because they have rules crimes methods. They're fabricating audio and video while sequence shifting, forging and switching names into branch distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. And that's relevant because that's why and how there are evidence how they are used remotely. And now this is not just our nation. Every modern nation is used remotely when they make opinions and convictions about overall things. There are evidence tied to how they're preventing mandated law. You think that legitimate logic and ratiocination in psychology spoke for science, spoke for what is really the cause of people shooting each other, let alone the areas where it's easiest to discern. The only thing that complicates it is where and how everyone lies about emotions and passions, but then defends that, for example, pretend they're one thing. In other words, pretending emotions are one thing. In other words, there are five simultaneously, and that's relevant because one identity of value progression is relevant to the sequence truth, the value of sequence truth, even though it's gone. I mean, even though it's came before us. And then the value of the order of the finite, simultaneously, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. The value of the order of the active, distinctly, non-distinctly. This is the circuit. By each identity of value / value progression of a computer can't help it to be. No matter what sequence, no matter what hardware. This is how. This is one identity of volume is self-generating. Each identity of volume has a distinct identity of relationship to itself. And value / value progression. Value of that. Positive or negative to itself. See, but we are prevented science, while the science is not by accident, originally still our intersciences uses of words like theory, words / values like theory. Offensively, per this method that keeps defenses of offensive uses of syntax, of semantics, in locations where they already had used. See, this is a horizontal, this is a vertical organized crime method. Sequentially, for example, that they are involved with. Each individual had, from off their campuses, recorded, even if they like things about it and are happy and whatever like that. It's not about passions, emotions. If you want to make it about passions, emotions, make it about those five. Make it true in relationship to those five identities of sequence nature, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. Now, this is how they force conversations between people too. Strangers, because the identity thefts, frauds, roles was actually recorded. But you have to follow mandated law. These are people that have been, in other words, the training of the investigators, everything. They can't defend themselves, so they forge names and switch names into branch with these Sullivans. So the whole bunch of people tied to a Sullivan, forging names, switching names with a whole bunch of other people, with the Wethersfield Police Department that is involved with wire crimes, also with town offices, also with fire inspectors, and also with the people that answer the phones with fire departments and that live near it and work near it. With the sense and sensibilities being coached, everyone forced to speak about through other people. Because the investigators, interbranched distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, they were kept and are kept needing to hide liable aggressions. They already did so by using, not by accident, the convenience of actually occurring bad things, where they could use those bad things to fake things and to hide their life aggressions. In other words, they have roles with a breaching organized crime method worse than overt criminal enterprises. That was entrenched here since before our founding parents were born. Those founding parents who wanted us to understand how slavery was entrenched sickly distinctly in the North and in the South, per breaching methods method to keep how sickly, non-distinctly, fact treatment nature self-valued, syntax styles self-valued, obfuscated, not understood, and prevented free speech. Demonstration of itself, our soul's words. Call through your herds. So, follow mandated law. We have offensive affronts. We have, we have only incompetence as any identity of the law. Too many ways. Now that's only positive, one way. See, things like slavery. Anyone who denies it's positive, it's negative, always not denying exceptions, not valuing them deny. There's no exceptions. Slavery is not good. And anyone who denies it, the good thing is nature itself will demonstrate their premises treatments are criminally foreign influenced. Their sequence treatments are going to be not right, not valuing what is actually discernibly true. Always, not denying exceptions. So there's a different identity of truth. One identity of truth, one identity of volume as value / nature. Value as nature / nature as value. As sequence / simultaneous nature. It will guide. Ancient gaming system. Before we were forced to be the course of human events. To paraphrase Abraham Lincoln. And while being the course of human events, we are a value / value progression. as space/existence, where both space, existence, and the slash as distinct, complete identities. They are simultaneously semi-nature relationships to one identity of relationship to itself, in the perfect value progression of an as that, which is at least a little bit more and more of an as, and at least as the identity of the body of forever. So the identity as this identity of volume is greater than each identity it is as. It is also to from while being as. And it is further with. And is further for itself. Bach sings of Santa's awful long. Will guide you home. So, please follow mandated law. The same people involved interstates leading up to and in the World Trade Center attack context. They are recorded and involved with other natures of other bonded natures of organized crime, acts, roles, like wrongdoing and such like that. A whole bunch of people so they have the sense and sensibilities of everybody. Where they're attaching people to fake locations, fake ties to each other, fake natures of ties to each other, pretend uses of passions and emotions for sequence shifts, roles, with the predicate acts, with the databases. A whole bunch of people tied to a Debbie Gold and to a Lee Gold. I never met Lee Gold. Debbie Gold, I only know her, her in the context where she sought me out to come record, confess, demonstrate she was involved with sequence shifts. I don't know what she was talking about either, till pretending passions and emotions that way. Pretending I had a conversation with her ever. And these are people that have roles with setting up exceptions in exception nature to pretend not to realize, with locations. Fact-cheating nature, oriented predicate acts. Now, hundreds of nations were doing this at once, and are doing this at once. And now that is where and has their identities of laws and of title, and of people that are where and how, that in relationship to where we only have peaceful treatments to things like wars. Needs to counter overt predicate acts. Things like criminal and seditious natures, wrongdoers. Needs to counter the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. Especially the private ones juxtaposed. Victims, victim, predator, ploy. It's not to leave out how they're victims. It's to show how everyone was engineered victim, predator roles. With this, that can't be entertained, and our founders' history for us as they wanted it and needed it presented, and defended, and revealed. At the same time, they can't stand it. They can't defend themselves and pretend to realize that. So they self-value not by accident. Tactically, sickly, distinctly, obfuscated American history, roles, pretending other. You don't have to know much. There's a predicate acts delivery system method, a breaching method. There's slavery, there's criminally foreign influenced fact treatment nature. There's slavery, there's physical delusions. There's slavery, prejudice. That's not what you counter. Those things against everyone, and we're going to examine how sickly, not distinctly